The next time Roger Goodell and Jon Gruden are in the same place, they could have all sorts of interesting conversations. It's been nearly 4 years to the day that Jon Gruden was forced to resign as head coach of the Raiders after what seemed to be a strategic leak of supposedly confidential emails that had been collected by Beth Wilkinson in the extensive investigation into the Washington football team and owner Dan Snyder. 650,000 documents. They were all secret, except for a small handful that contained highly inappropriate comments made by Jon Gruden when he was working for ESPN in 2011 and sent to Bruce Allen, the former president of the Washington organization. So, and I've always struggled to compartmentalize this. The sentiments that were shared in the multiple tranches of documents that were leaked, because the first leak to the Wall Street Journal didn't get the job done. So the Raiders played on Sunday. They won. Monday night, here comes the leak to the New York Times. That resulted in Gruden resigning. The statements were inappropriate and unacceptable, but somebody weaponized those emails. Somebody decided we're going to take these documents, we're going to leak them to the Wall Street Journal first, the New York Times second, because we want Jon Gruden out. Somebody did it deliberately. His lawsuit that he filed in November of 2001, Michael Hawley, was aimed and is still aimed at getting to the bottom of it. And we're talking about all this for one reason. There was a development in Nevada Supreme Court yesterday. After finding earlier this year in favor of Jon Gruden that the case plays out in court, not in the NFL's secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration, the Nevada Supreme Court denied the NFL's motion for a rehearing, which is a procedural step toward the NFL taking it to the U.S. Supreme Court. The NFL had no comment. When I asked them, is the Supreme Court next? I would wager a lot of money, and the odds should be very low, that the NFL will try to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow. And the Nevada Supreme Court not only ruled on this, they ruled on it unanimously. I think it was 7-0. So it's clear. There's no ambiguity when it comes to Nevada. Now, you tell me, Mike, you are, of the two of us, you have practiced. You know how the law works. You've been a part of this. Doesn't it just make sense to settle? I mean, does the NFL really want to take this to the Supreme Court and have everything? Because if it becomes public, we learn a lot more. We learn about Jon Gruden. We learn more about Gruden. We learn more about the NFL and its practices and some of the secrets that the league doesn't want to make public. Doesn't it just make sense to settle this thing and move on?
Well, yes, but the time isn't right for that. The NFL still has one last Hail Mary that can be thrown legally to try to force this thing into a process. And I call it a secret rigged kangaroo court for one very important reason. It is. And secret is the key as it relates to finding out who ordered the code red. Who is it that leaked the information to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal? And obviously the reporters aren't going to talk, but there's a small universe of potential leakers. Not many people had those documents, had access to those emails. Once the discovery process starts, and that is the pretrial extensive multiple months where you can ask for documents, you can subpoena records, you can interview witnesses. It's called a deposition. Once that process starts, if that ever starts, that's when the NFL starts coughing up cash for Jon Gruden. Now, that's when Jon Gruden's going to have a decision to make, because there was a profile of Gruden a couple of years ago from ESPN.com, and the report was he wants to burn the house down. He wants to burn the house down. And you don't do that by settling. You do that by finding out who ordered the code red. Some people think it was Daniel Snyder. I don't know whether or not that's the case, but he's one of the people who would have had access to it because the emails are on his computers. Computers owned by him.
But I was just saying, Mike, if it's Daniel Snyder, I'm just logically, the NFL would not protect him.
Well, but they got to protect themselves because they're responsible for what he does. If he did it, they're responsible for it. They lose. So I think there's just a general, and the knee-jerk reaction is we got to get this thing into arbitration because they control the process then. Most companies, let me just say this, because I think this is the thing we need to be aware of, because this case can have an impact nationwide. Most companies will try to find a way to finagle any and all disputes, especially those filed by employees, current or former, into arbitration. But usually the arbitration clause says that it's an outside party. Now, the outside party tends to be in the pocket of the company because they keep getting the work from the company. I don't want to be that cynical. At least it's somebody who's not employed directly by the company. The difference here is if the Supreme Court endorses an arbitration process that allows the CEO to be the arbitrator or his designee, you know what's going to happen? Pick a major company. Their arbitration clause is if this ultimately is upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, any major company would be foolish not to do the same thing, where the CEO or his or her designee decides who's going to resolve the disputes when someone is suing the company or making a claim against the company. It's wrong. It's not justice. I've said for years, Roger Goodell should not want to be in this position. It's like Tom Brady. Tom Brady shouldn't want to have a conflict of interest. Roger Goodell has a clear conflict of interest when he's asked to resolve these disputes, especially when he's a party to it. He shouldn't want it. So I'm hoping the worst case scenario is the Supreme Court takes up the case and finds in favor of the NFL. That's the worst thing that could happen. The best thing is we get to find out. We get to find out who undermined the integrity of the 2021 season by taking out the head coach of an NFL franchise 5 weeks in. They talk about integrity, Michael. Somebody undermined the integrity of the entire season by taking out Jon Gruden. It could have been done before the season. It could have been done after the season. Somebody decided to do it during the season. I hope we get to find out, and I hope that person's held accountable.
Me too.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.